Nashville, Tennessee in 1991 was a city that smelled of gospel, old guitar wood, and the hope that your voice might be heard by someone important. If you found yourself on Music Row, southwest of downtown, you would see the offices and studios where country music is born. Here, people believe that any soul-deep wound can be healed by 3 chords and an honest verse. But Nashville isn't just about music. It's the birthplace of hot chicken, scorchingly spicy poetry. In the city, they still whisper that this dish was born from a broken heart and a desire for revenge. One woman, tired of a lover's infidelities, decided to cook him a meal that would make him see hell while he was still alive. She generously doused the chicken in cayenne pepper, expecting tears of repentance, but the scoundrel simply asked for seconds. That's how it goes sometimes. What was meant to be a punishment becomes a legend. In 1991, the city encountered another legend, a series of robberies so absurd that they deserved a genius in the world of heists statuette, if such a thing existed. These weren't Hollywood action movies. There were no guys in leather jackets storming banks waving pistols, and certainly no screeching tires of getaway cars. Nah, it was much quieter and therefore much more insulting. Precious stones began to vanish from jewelry stores. It happened like this. A client would buy a piece of jewelry, let it shine at a social gala at the Cheekwood estate among the botanical gardens and art, and then, sometimes weeks later, return to the store in a rage. An appraisal would show that some of the stones in the ring or necklace were fakes. The clients were as angry as if they'd been handed a piece of cardboard instead of a wedding cake. The sellers threw up their hands. Something wicked was happening between the one who sells and the one who buys, and no one could understand the exact moment a diamond turned into common glass. Chapter 2 of Gentlemen, Angry Poodles, and Things We Have Lost. Our hero, Gordon, was 68 years old. That is the exact age when hurrying seems not just foolish, but vulgar. For Gordon, rushing was a luxury that people his age no longer brag about. If you see a 68-year-old man running for a bus, it means he either loves something very much or has forgotten something very important. Gordon forgot nothing. He had a poodle named Bublik, and if you're imagining a cute little dog from a picture, you're mistaken. Bublik was white, spiteful, and eternally angry at anything that had the audacity to look at him. You know the type. Dogs that look at the world as if it owes them a large sum of money and has no intention of paying it back. Bublik was exactly like that. This dog recognized only the hands of his master. He would often climb into Gordon's arms as if onto a captain's bridge to bark at the passing world from a safe height. They were an ideal tandem, the old man who had seen it all and the white poodle who hated it all in advance. Their walks took up most of their time, and they had plenty of time to give. In the Nashville of 1991, time still knew how to stretch like molasses. They walked in parks, in squares, and along the banks of the Cumberland River. The river flowed calmly, and Gordon walked in step with it. Gordon was a gentleman of that very era that we have successfully buried under mountains of plastic and haste. He was one of those people for whom a colored pocket square meant more to the ladies than empty promises about tomorrow. He was always dressed to the nines. His suit fit him as if he had been born in it rather than having bought it in a store. Quite often, he received compliments from young ladies. They would smile at him, sensing that vanishing aroma of dignity. And honestly, I truly hope you can one day explain to your younger generation exactly what we have lost over these years. We lost the art of wearing a pocket square so that it doesn't look like a costume. We lost the silence, but Gordon preserved it. He walked along the embankment, holding his angry white cloud in his arms, looking like the last living exhibit in a museum of real men. He didn't yet know that soon his silence would end in a jewelry store, where diamonds sometimes turn into glass and dogs become the most effective accomplices. Chapter 3 of Clyde, Fords, and the Fine Art of Not Asking Too Many Questions. The fellow named Clyde was 34 years old, and he had just taken a leap that many would consider madness. He had quit his job as a car salesman at a Ford dealership. You see, selling Fords is one thing. There you deal with metal, horsepower, and the smell of new rubber. But when his friend and former classmate invited him for an internship at one of Nashville's top jewelry stores, Clyde realized it was time to sell something more fragile: dreams and status. Clyde was driven by the desire to get rich, like all of us, really, but his ambitions were a few inches taller than those of most Tennessee residents. He diligently flipped through catalogs, memorizing carats and clarity like a prayer. He learned to be peerless in the eyes of ladies and their gentlemen. Working in jewelry is like being a psychologist, only you get paid a commission. Clyde quickly learned one vital thing: professional blindness. He often saw the same gentleman with completely different ladies. In those moments, he maintained his poise, polite enough not to betray the gentleman and charming enough not to scare off the good vibes of a deal. Management liked such ambition and such flexibility. "We need a man like this," they said, and Clyde felt that he was finally where he belonged. But recognition always has a flip side, and Clyde's share was that very difficult conversation that they don't prepare you for at car dealerships. On a day that was far from beautiful, the store door didn't just open, it practically flew off its hinges. A client stood there. One of those clients who doesn't ask, but demands. He wanted justice. He demanded the restoration of his reputation, which in Nashville was worth more than the store's annual revenue. It had all happened at one of those social events where patrons flaunt their luster. The Cheekwood estate, evening, candles, billionaires. His companion, in a stunning black dress, the kind that makes men forget how to breathe, was enjoying champagne. Everything would have been perfect if not for a local jeweler who hadn't taken his eyes off her necklace all evening.
This piercing gaze annoyed the woman's companion more than a sour note in a country song. Unable to take it, he approached the jeweler and asked, "What exactly attracts you so much to my woman, if I may ask?" The answer was short and cold, like ice in a glass. "The craftsmanship is beautiful, though I have serious doubts about the authenticity of the jewelry. Not as a whole, but just a couple of the stones on it." The evening was ruined. Then came long arguments, a quiet scandal, and the realization that you, a man with billions in the bank, looked like a fool who gave his beloved bits of glass. "What exactly do you do here?" the client roared, slamming the jewelry box onto the table. An investigation began. It turned out this wasn't the first case in the city. When you shell out a round sum for your beloved smile, you want that smile to be real, just like the stones around her neck. The fuss was quickly turned into a regrettable misunderstanding. The loss was restored to the client. They apologized as deeply as they could, and they gave him a discount, a very good discount, because in Nashville, no one wants to lose clients like that. Clyde watched the client leave and felt something shifting inside him. He didn't yet know that soon an old man with a white poodle would walk into his shop, and Clyde's ambitions would collide with something that cannot be measured in carats. Chapter 4 of Jumps, Diamonds, and Why Ladies Should Sometimes Think Twice Before Reaching for a Strange Dog. A little later that same day, our heroes, Gordon and his loyal, if extremely grumpy companion, Bublik, found themselves near the window of that very jewelry store. Gordon just wanted to walk by. He was a man of strolls, not shopping. No, Bublik had other plans. You know, dogs sometimes act as if they've caught the scent, not of a sausage, but of destiny itself. The dog suddenly froze and then began straining toward the store doors with such force it was as if they were giving away free immortality inside, or at the very least, very high-quality ham. He demanded entry at any cost. After several failed attempts to coax the dog further, Gordon sighed, and gentlemen know how to sigh in a way that carries the full weight of human existence, picked Bublik up in his arms and went in. "Good day, sir. What brings you to us?" Clyde asked politely. By this time, Clyde had learned to recognize good manners and refined taste.
He looked at Gordon and saw not just an old man, but a potential opportunity. And Clyde didn't like missing opportunities. "Good day," Gordon replied with a slight smile. "I am here more by the will of this gentleman." "Well, you know, this fellow's zest for life was clearly instilled by his master," Clyde replied, flashing his signature charm. A conversation began. It was that kind of intelligent and pleasant dialogue that usually serves as an aperitif before a major deal. Clyde felt that Gordon was a man who appreciated things built to last. At that moment, a Mercedes braked at the entrance. Clyde recognized the clients before the car doors opened by the specific, expensive sound of the brakes. They were a pair of regulars.
They entered the showroom and headed straight for the counter, their whole demeanor telling Clyde that their time was worth roughly as much as the entire store. Clyde, being a professional to his core, suggested that Gordon look around and find something of his own among the displays of luxury and wealth. Gordon politely agreed and stepped aside. Clyde immediately switched all his diligence to the arriving couple, showering the lady with exquisite compliments. A necklace and earrings instantly appeared on the display, the very ones Clyde had recommended to this client before. He persuaded the lady to try them on, whispering that such a piece requires a special occasion, and that occasion is today. And there they were, the necklace and earrings on her. Clyde fell silent. He knew. Words are noise, but the sparkle of stones in the mirror is music. The lady looked at her reflection and felt like exactly who she always wanted to be. The card had been played. Clyde could almost hear the rustle of the check. And then the lady noticed the lovely old man with the snow-white creature in his arms. You know how ladies are. They can be looking at 10-carat diamonds, but the moment they see a fluffy dog, they forget why they even came. "What is this beautiful creature's name?" she exclaimed, reaching out to Bublik. "Forgive me," Gordon said quickly, "but this gentleman does not possess refined manners. His name is Bublik." Gordon took a step back, trying to avoid a collision of worlds, but the lady, seized by a sudden delight, took a step forward. Bublik, as previously noted, lacked manners. He made one sharp, lightning-fast leap with his jaws wide and snatched the necklace right off the lovely lady's neck. Silence fell over the shop. Clyde, watching this from behind the counter, went cold. He already saw his commissions flying out the window along with his reputation. He rushed toward them to resolve this absurd misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Gordon, muttering something quietly under his breath, slowly leaned toward the floor. A second later, he was handing the necklace to Clyde. "Please forgive me. This absolutely should not have happened. Please forgive my companion," Gordon said with sincere contrition in his voice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a treat for his fierce partner so that he would finally calm down and come to him. "Perhaps we should continue on our way. I wouldn't want to ruin your evening." Gordon picked up Bublik and they hastily stepped out into the street. Surprisingly, no one was angry. The lady laughed, the client smirked. The incident with the old man and his harmless dog seemed more like a funny anecdote than a crime. The necklace was fine, the client was in a good mood, and that meant the deal was still on. Gordon slowly continued his way down the street, leading Bublik on a leash, who walked ahead with the look of a dog who had just won a war.
Chapter 5 of Shadows on Film, Cold Coffee, and Bags That Are Not What They Seem. 3 weeks later, Clyde realized one important thing. 3 weeks is exactly the time it takes for a diamond to turn into a lawsuit. It was the second case in 6 months at their store where there were more questions than answers. Those very clients, the ones who arrived in the Mercedes and smiled at Bublik, had returned. But this time, they weren't smiling. They brought a complaint. An appraisal confirmed the center stone in the necklace was a fake. A detective entered the game. You know the type. Detectives who look like they were born in a trench coat with chronic insomnia. He had been investigating similar cases across the city and beyond for a year. No clues, no witnesses. The case seemed both ridiculous and completely impossible. During the interrogation, the detective flipped through CCTV footage. His attention was caught by a strange old man. He appeared in the frame and then dissolved,
as if he were made not of flesh and blood, but of old film and city fog. It was decided to follow this ghost. The detective picked up the trail and spent an entire week shadowing the pair, Gordon and Bublik. And then everything repeated exactly as Clyde had described. The dogs strained toward the doors of another jewelry store, and they went inside. The detective waited, watching through the window, and as soon as the pair decided to leave, he blocked their exit. "Sir, forgive me. Could you spare a moment? The matter is important and cannot wait." Gordon, being a true gentleman, was happy to help. They all went back into the store together. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. In that time, it turned out that one of the pieces the salesman had just politely shown Gordon indeed contained a fake stone. The police immediately pulled the recordings and studied the statements. Gordon was searched. They looked into every pocket of his impeccable jacket. The result? Nothing. No stone, no tools, no trace of criminal intent. "I understand, Detective. It's your job," Gordon said softly. "I'm happy to assist, but I'm afraid I'm simply useless to you." It all looked like an absurd coincidence. The detective offered his apologies, Gordon left his address in case of further testimony, and they parted ways. All the detective could do was advise the store owner to look at his suppliers. He stood there, not understanding what had he missed. Meanwhile, Clyde was temporarily suspended. In the world of jewelers, stay in touch is a polite way of saying, "We suspect you most of all." But Clyde wasn't going to take it lying down. For him, this wasn't just a job, it was reputation. And reputation is the only thing a man has left when they take away his keys to the store. At night, Clyde studied the camera footage. He wrote down dates and times, trying to find logic where there was none. And he kept coming back to one thought. What does that dog have to do with it? Like the detective, he clung to a thin thread. The old man and the poodle. Something here wasn't right. "I have plenty of time," Clyde told his reflection in the dark TV screen. "So, we'll play detective."
He set off on Gordon's trail. Finding him wasn't hard. The harmless old man moved through Nashville with the speed of an hourglass. Clyde followed him from his car. He saw Gordon walking, saw him stopping, and, strangest of all, saw him carefully collecting his pet's waste into small bags and tossing them into city bins. "I think I'm going crazy," Clyde muttered, finishing another cold coffee. "If this keeps up, I'll need a psychiatrist because I'm watching an old man pick up after a dog." But one day, the scenario repeated again. Jewelry store, dog, street. Everything was the same. What is happening? Why does the dog pull the leash specifically in front of a jewelry shop? Clyde's thoughts got tangled like line on an old fishing reel. Who is this old man? Where does he live? This thought weighed on him completely. The tailing ended at an old house where Gordon picked Bublik up and disappeared into the entrance. Clyde stayed in the car. He stared at the windows, feeling that the answer was close, but it was slipping away like a diamond turned to glass. Chapter 6. Of Boys, Secret Doors, and the Circus That Never Ends. On the landing of the old house sat Floyd. Floyd was 10 years old, and at that age, the world is divided into two parts: the things your parents forbid you from doing, and Mr. Gordon. Floyd's mother was the kind of woman who believed a pet was just a sack of fur and bacteria, so there was nothing in their apartment that could wag a tail. The boy's only salvation was his kind-hearted neighbor, and the poodle Bublik with his unbearable temperament. Floyd was the only person, other than Gordon, whom Bublik allowed to scratch him behind the ear, though he acted as if he were doing a great favor. "Hi, Mr. Gordon," Floyd exclaimed, jumping up. "Can I play with Bublik today?" Gordon looked at the boy, and something flashed in his eyes that Clyde, watching from the car, couldn't have seen. It wasn't just kindness, it was a conspiracy. "Of course, Floyd. Could you give our mutual friend a little extra care? I forgot my things at the laundromat. It's in the next block. I'll be back in 40 minutes. "Of course, Mr. Gordon. As always, it will be an honor to keep him company. For a 10-year-old boy, as always is the most reliable oath in the world." Clyde, having finished his bitter coffee, was already about to start the engine to end this lingering paranoia he called dog poop duty. But at that moment, the building door opened again, and a man walked out. It was Gordon, but Clyde didn't recognize him at first. Where was the gentleman dressed to the nines? Where was the pocket square? The old man was wearing some strange rags, an old jacket and a worn-out backpack. He no longer moved with the speed of an hourglass. Clyde felt that detective on the TV shows wake up inside him. He pulled his baseball cap lower, hopped out of the car, and followed. Gordon didn't slow down. He followed a familiar route.
But now his stops seemed insane to Clyde. The old man approached trash containers, reached inside for a fraction of a second, and immediately continued on his way. Clyde tried to keep up, but at one point the old man simply vanished. He dissolved into the alleys of Nashville as if he had never been there. When Clyde, breathing heavily and wiping sweat from his forehead, returned to the house, the light was no longer on in Gordon's apartment. "This is madness," he whispered. And now, it's time to clarify something important. You see, Gordon wasn't always just an old man with a poodle. For most of his life, he lived under the big top. He was part of a circus troupe that traveled the whole country and half the world. Gordon was everything at once: a trainer, a clown, a magician, and a ringmaster. He knew how to control a crowd's attention. He knew that if you want to hide something, you just have to make everyone look the other way. The days of traveling circuses were fading, but skill and agility don't go anywhere. They just look for a new application. Let's look at how it worked. Bublik the dog wasn't just a spiteful dog, he was a great actor. At the sight of a jewelry store, he put on a show that grabbed all the attention of the staff and customers. People are built that way. They see either a very beautiful necklace or a very funny dog. They don't see old men in suits at all. To society, they are transparent. While Bublik jumped and barked, Gordon did what he had spent decades learning in the arena. Removing a stone from its setting and replacing it wasn't theft in his eyes, it was a trick, the great illusion. But the main problem remained: evidence. Guessed it yet? It was all about the butter. Gordon always kept it in his pocket, Bublik's favorite treat. As soon as the maestro extracted the stone, he called his accomplice. The dog gobbled up the butter along with what was inside. The perfect crime. No detective would find a diamond in Gordon's pockets because the diamond was in a live safe with a very bad temper. And now, the finale. To extract the jewels from Bublik took time. Yes, those very bags. Gordon wasn't just a responsible citizen picking up after his dog. Inside every bag, he placed a small magnet. He deftly attached them to the inner walls of metal trash bins. Gordon wrote down the address of every drop, and in the evening, changed into rags, he hurried to collect everything before the garbage truck arrived. Floyd was his perfect alibi. While Gordon made his evening rounds of the bins, the boy played honestly with the dog. Clyde, of course, couldn't have dreamed up such a scenario. You couldn't make this up on purpose even in Nashville. But he smelled a lie. He went to the nearest phone booth and dialed the detective's number. Clyde gave it all up: the rags, the bins, Floyd. "Watch the door," the detective ordered, "and don't you dare leave." A short time later, everyone was at the house: the detective, the police, and even a local reporter hungry for a scoop. They made their way up the stairs and saw Floyd. The boy was sitting on the step, calmly finishing an apple. "Son, step aside," the officer barked. "There's an arrest about to happen." They surrounded the door. The detective was already prepared to kick it in with his shoulder, but Floyd calmly stood up and handed him the key. "It'll be easier this way," the boy said. The detective took the key and turned it in the lock. The oared door opened. The police burst inside with shouts, ready to take the criminal alive. No, there was no one in the apartment. There was a table, there was a chair, there was a bed, and a completely empty wardrobe which no longer held any impeccable suits or colored pocket squares. In Nashville in 1991, people realized if you've spent your whole life as a magician, your final trick should always be a disappearance.